All right. Hello, everyone. Um, this week we're going to continue working on my feed reader project and pulling together different things from the interface. I found a few improvements that we need to make to our database model, and then we'll start writing the database interface itself. So the first thing is that I noticed we need to we need to have a method for initializing our database. And this is pretty much going to do the same thing regardless of whichever database backend we decide to use. We had discussed previously that it was always going to be SQLite because this is just a local desktop application. And I think we're going to stick to that. But if somebody is so inclined in the future, we can set this up pretty easily to allow this to be expanded to use other database backends pretty easily. So for our database interface, we're going to add an Initialize Db method, which will set up our bindings for our database. So that's one thing. The next is I noticed that we need to put some additional indexes into our database. Now, if you're not familiar with database management, an index is an additional piece of information about a column in a database table. And what this information does is it allows the database to sort on that column more easily. So what are we going to sort on? Well, typically when you are looking at your feeds, you're looking at them in the order that they came in, so their timestamp. Well, that prompted me to know something else, is that our feed item does not have a timestamp associated with it. So items in a feed have a timestamp, a date time timestamp associated with them, and typically you want to order on that. So, and we know for a fact that unless we query our feeds in a particular order every single time and at a consistent rate, items are not going to appear in our feed item table in timestamp order because we might be querying one feed once a day and another feed once an hour. You could have a feed that was queried later have items that are earlier than other feeds that are queried more often. So we need two things. We need to specify the timestamp for this object. Now, I may rename this column later. I have to go into the feed reader documentation to figure out what this attribute of a feed item is actually called. So it might not be timestamp in the future. So this is ORM. This is going to be required. It is going to be a date time. And now we're going to add an extra argument on it called index. Index equals true. And now we are going to, this allows us to sort based on that timestamp very efficiently. If we don't have this index in here and we tell it to order, when we do our query, we tell it to order our feed items by timestamp, it'll be really slow. And seeing as how this is a query we're going to do frequently, we want it to be quick. So what else do we want to order based on? We want to order based on whether or not it's been read. So that, because commonly we're going to have a view in our application where it only shows the items that have been read. So we want it to only, if we want it to exclude unread items, we want to be able to find the read items more quickly. So we need to index based on that column. Index equals true. Okay, now this is also, we're going to also be frequently be querying on both of these at the same time. So we just want the items that were read and we want to order them by timestamp. So we need to create an index from both of these columns, which you can totally do. That is very much a SQL thing. So that if you say, so that if you have a conditional that says, will only show me the red items and order them by timestamp, having separate indexes is good. Having an index where you're indexed on both columns, so you can do, so you can more quickly satisfy both queries at the same time. You can create, usually if you were doing this by hand in SQL, depending on the database you were using, you would specify a separate index, and you would say this this index is composed of these two columns. Well, of course, any ORM worth its salt is going to give you the ability to create additional indexes, and the way you do that is with Composite Index. So we're going to go ORM dot let's see, composite. There we go, Composite Index. And then we specify our column attributes that we want to index on. So we're going to go, we'll do red first, because that's going to be our filtering condition, and then times stamp. There. So that will create, now we have a composite index of those two columns, which is great. Okay, so what else do we need to put in indexes on? So in my previous, in the feed reader that I currently use, everything is unordered. Or more specifically, it doesn't automatically order things based on the feed name. It just, when you add it, it adds it to the end. If you want to change the order, you've got to manually stick it in the right spot. I don't like that. I think it's lame. I think we should always sort our feeds by their name. So we're going to add an index to the name field here. Let's see. Last update, update rate, etag. Okay, so none of these I believe need an index yet, so we're just going to go ahead and skip them all for now. I don't see any composite index. Oh, and it should be noted that foreign keys are automatically indexed in PonyORM, so that's why I'm not putting an index on group, and why I'm not putting an index on feed here, because those indexes, I believe if I'm reading the documentation correctly, those are already created. So, okay, now we've got a better idea of what our database is going to look like. So now we should create our interface. So let's see. Yeah, I expected 2 blank lines. Of course you did. So now, and this is not really much of a software engineering question, but it's more of a style question. Is, do we want to create this interface in our DB model class, or do we want to create it in a new class? Just to keep things clean and simple, I'm going to put it in its own class. All right. Default interactive shell is now ZCH. Oh, right. That's right. I've got this thing set up to use bash. Huh. Anyway, okay, so workspaces, Kyle's feed reader. Let's see. Source. Okay. And we're going to create a new file called db_interface.py. That'll create our interface file. And now we're going to actually start creating our actual database interface. And some of these pieces of our interface are going to be really easy to connect to. So if you want to follow along in the documentation, there's connecting to the database at this URL. I'll go ahead and post that in the chat. Chat. There we go. To everyone. There. Okay. Now we've already created our DB object, but we need to import it. So we're going to go from dot DB model import. And while it's tempting to do star, we're going to call out our individual things. Now we are going to need to, we're basically going to need to import everything. Group, feed item. It's considered bad practice to use import star in actual production code or any code other than the REPL. So we're going to, even though we're importing everything, we're going to specifically call everything out. This way, we also don't run the risk of accidentally stomping on things in our current namespace. Or if we stomp on something in if we use the star, we might stomp on something from that thing's namespace, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to start creating our interface. So let's start with, so we have our DB object, which this is kind of interesting because we can just do this as a series of functions because we're always going to be, this DB represents our database class. And because that's now global to this database interface class, and there really aren't any other attributes we need to keep track of, there's no reason to create a class. We can just do this as a series of functions. So let's start with the obvious, initialize DB. And the way I've written this, we can just copy this verbatim. And let's go ahead and give ourselves an extra line. Okay, so in order to attach this to a database, we call db.bind. And we are going to pass in, we are basically going to pass in provider is equal to provider. And then we are going to just pass in our ** KW args because we don't know all of the arguments available to this provider. And this frees us up so that if we, because the arguments when we call bind, our arguments for SQLite are different than our arguments for MySQL. And they're all keyword arguments according to the documentation. So we just grab all the remaining arguments and just pass them right through. And the only thing we might, so I want the provider to default to SQLite, but this is just so we have a default value for this thing. And then when we actually call this, we're going to have to provide some arguments that are specific to SQLite, specifically the file name and the fact that we want to actually create the database. So that's really all there is to initialize DB. Oh, and there's one more step. We need to actually create the tables in the database if they don't exist. So DB, generate mapping, create tables equals true. And what this will do is if the tables in the database do not exist, they will be created and everything will be initialized auto-magically. Let's see. Now there's two. Now just to simplify this, because we're going to be using SQLite explicitly, I'm going to add in another helper function. Let's see. Let's call this initialize SQL. And this isn't strictly necessary, but we'll go ahead and do this. So we'll ask for this will just make clear that if we want to initialize SQLite, this is the things we need to make it work. So we need a file name, and that's it. And what we'll do then is we'll come in and we will call initialize DB. Our provider will be, well, it defaults to SQLite, but we're just going to pass it in anyway because why not? We're going to say file name equals file name, and then we're going to create DB equals true. So this just narrows it down to what we want it to do. And for those who are curious, I could also do this with the function tools partial method, but I don't think we need to get that crazy. We're not going to hand this. Yeah, so we're not going to bother with that. Okay, so we've got our initialize db function. Let's see, we don't need any of that. Declaring entities, nope, nope, nope. Okay, so let's come over here and look at what we need to do is create DB sessions for these other methods. So whenever we need to work with, so one of the things Pony does automatically is it creates a connection pool when we bind to a database. And then anytime we want to do anything with the database, we start a DB session. Now, a DB session, let's see, is actually, I believe it's an OR in the ORM namespace. So let's see. Technically, this should go above that. So what the DB session is it allows us to have a function that within that function we have a database connection available to us. And then as we interact and make modifications to the database and do queries, it uses that session associated with our function. So the way that we do this, again, if I'm reading the documentation correctly, is we define our function. So let's do add feed. And that's a function. What am I doing wrong here? Rate 1 hour, update rate 1 hour. So let's say, let's do from datetime import, time delta. And then we'll change this to time delta hours equals 1. And then we will just do a pass on that. Okay. Now what we do is we decorate this function with ORM DB underscore session. And this will create a this will basically means that within the context of this function, we have a new transaction that's started. We make whatever modifications that we want to our database, and then it will automatically commit them when the function exits. So so this whole the function itself is considered atomic. Now, if we want to like split that up and call commit part of the way through, we are perfectly welcome to that. You can just call orm.commit, and it will commit what we've done so far. So let's see. So we're going to add a feed. And so what do we need to do to add a feed? So we're going to create a new feed object. And let's see. So we're going to do f. I don't actually think we need to do anything with this, but we can go f equals feed, and then we're going to just start passing stuff into it. So its name is going to equal our name. Let's see, the URL, and that's required. So URL is going to equal our URL. This is pretty straightforward. Home page is equal to home page. Let's see, update rate. Update rate is going to equal our update rate. And let's see. So our group is going to be a group object. So notice here that I have group defaulting to none. So we don't necessarily need a group for our feed. Of course, we could actually have a default. We could have a default group. I think Chandrika mentioned that last time or the time before, where we have a group just for the quote unquote ungrouped items. I think we're going to still allow group to be none. So we will go ahead and say group is equal to group. Now, the question then becomes, how do we specify this? How do we specify this group? So, do we actually pass in a group into a group object into the feed, or do we look up the group by name and add it in? And so I think what we want to do is we want to specify the group by its name. So the first thing we actually need to do is we need to look up the group. So if group is not none, so we'll assume that it's so we'll say let's change this to group name, then it's more explicit. So group name is not none. Stop it. So let's say group equals none. If group name is not none, we're going to say group equals, and then we're going to have to do a query. Let's see. So I need to look up how to do that real quick. Let's see. Writing queries. Let's see. Query show, query persons, select. Let's see. Now this is where I get a little bit confused. So let's look at the documentation for a moment here. Okay, so I just realized something. Our group names need to be unique. So we're going to add the unique key. Key equals true. And let's see, do we want this to be in? Yeah, let's go ahead and index this guy as well. Equals true. Okay, so we can call the group get method, and get, we can specify our key that we want to look up by. So we look up by group name, And then the question becomes, well, what happens if we specify the group name that does not exist? So the assumption here is that we are only going to get groups that exist. So this actually shows another hole in our interface. This is why we need to be able to add a group name. There we go. And so what we can do here, so there's a couple of ways that we can handle this. We can say that if this group, if we don't get anything back from this get call, now I'm not sure if this raises an exception if group doesn't exist. We could go ahead and create the group, or we could get the or we could create the groups ahead of time and list them. So I'm going to lean towards adding them ahead of time. We can also combine some of this stuff, so we can actually call one DB session function from another if we're so inclined. But for now, we'll just say that we're providing a valid group name. So if group name is not none, group equals group get group name. Okay, so now we just pass that into our feed, and we're done. When this function exits, it will add the it will add this feed to our database. It will actually commit it and it will write it to the database. Now you'll notice that we don't add the feed to the group, we just add the group to the feed. That's because the relationship that we set up for groups to feeds, and similarly from feeds to feed items, is we set up sets, and then we set up our group pointing back up. So when we set this in, when we set our group in our feed, we're telling it that there's a two-way relationship here, and so this will add our feed to the feeds that belong to group. And so the ORM just handles that for us. We don't need to worry about how that relationship is actually maintained. All right. And technically, we don't even need to do that because we're not going to do anything else with the feed when we're done. So once that closes, it commits, and that's that. So let's go ahead and add in our add group name function. Actually, let's just do this right here. And then we'll just change the name to add group. Close that off, add a new line, and then we'll just call group name equals name. And we're done. Now, if we try and duplicate group names, that will throw an error. So we'll need to probably address that in the future. We can either handle that on the UI side or we can handle that on the backend side in order to prevent the user from attempting to duplicate group names. Okay. So let's see. Let's go ahead and so we have add feed. We also have update feed. And let's see, delete feed, update feed item. We don't have an add feed item. Let's see. So that's something that we need to do as well. Let's see. Update feed item, update feed, add group, add feed. So let's see. Let's add feed item. Hi, May. Is that how you say your name? Hello? How's it going?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Just to participate?
Yeah, I've just been recording what I was planning on presenting anyway. I mean, eventually these are all going to go up on YouTube, and I wanted to make progress. So it's what I get for not sending out the reminder email.
Okay. Yeah, I was in another meeting and joined late. I was trying not to disturb. So that's why at the beginning I didn't say anything.
Oh, it's okay. I'm actually almost done. Have you been following along with this project?
Yeah, I followed some of them and whenever I can make it.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some like a really helpful. So
Good. I'm
you
glad.
just mentioned that you put on YouTube and
I haven't actually done it yet.
oh yeah.
So
Okay.
the old recordings from when I was still at PNNL, none
Mm.
of those are going to ever make it onto YouTube because
Uh,
they have to be cleared for security reasons because of the group that I was in. Even though I never did anything uh, with sensitive material ever in my entire career there, and it's cost prohibitive, so those videos are never going to see the light of day, unfortunately.
uh,
But since at my new job, they don't care because we don't work with anything classified. So I've been recording all these meetings. I just haven't gotten around to putting them on YouTube yet.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful when you do put on YouTube. There are some of those I would like to listen again.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, sure.
yeah.
And eventually, I mean, I've got a GitHub repository for notes, and all of these projects are going to end up there. So eventually, I'll put those out too. I just need to spend a weekend doing it, and I just haven't had time. I've been super busy.
Yeah, I understand. But really appreciate you uh, doing all those things. I know it's need time to prepare and probably need more time to really wrap up and make those available for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the preparation is not too bad. It's mostly me reading and doing stuff I was going to do anyway. Like this project, I've been doing this in my spare time anyway. It's just now I was like, hey, this is really good fodder for meetings, so I should just do that. Yeah, but thank you. I'm glad that you appreciate it.
Yeah, I know lots. Well, we have some people working in our group also appreciate those thing you present. Yeah, they introduced me to your well while you're still in PNL, they introduced me to the like invitation.
Yeah.
So I start to. Yeah,
Well,
but our group traveled too much. We missed
yeah,
a lot of those. So we'll be
yeah.
really interested in when you get the time to put them together.
Oh, so you're still at the lab?
Yeah, I still in.
Okay. Okay, so you can actually access the videos that are at the lab. They're just on a publicly available share.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and there's lots of them. I posted every single recording I made, and there's at least like 30 of them.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
um,
Is that, do you know the location? Like,
yeah.
it,
So okay, the exact location kind of escapes me at the moment. If you want to find out, um,
it's at Confluence. I know
yeah,
lots of people do
there's
the same
there's a
there.
Confluence link. So what you can do is, see, I used to just have it bookmarked, and I could just send you the bookmark. Um, so
Okay.
there's the Confluence page, and if you have the Confluence page, there's actually down at the bottom or at the top, there's a link to the share. So it's just like a Windows file share. Um, it,
Uh,
yeah. So, um, but there's the path to the file share on the Confluence page if you have if you know where the Confluence page is.
yeah, I'm new to the Confluence. I just heard of people say, oh, a lot of people put a lot of things in
Yeah,
Confluence,
yeah. Well,
but
it's
I haven't
it's
used there.
basically like the lab's personal Wikipedia. But yeah,
Okay.
there's a page for the Python users group. If you want to um if you want to find those videos, you can so somebody else took over the Python users group at the lab.
Yeah, I know someone like a start.
Yeah.
I just searched the Python user group. There is a homepage.
Oh, there is. Okay. That
Yeah,
okay.
and they have some PUG presentations.
Yeah.
I think that probably.
Okay, now I know for sure. So if you
Yeah, I see many of your name there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Hey, that.
if you want to find the Confluence page and subsequently the link to the videos hosted at the lab, you can contact let's see, Jeremy Hack would have it.
Jeremy. Okay.
Jeremy Hack, and if you see if you see his name on there, it's HAACK. Um,
Not
yeah.
yet.
Okay. But you
There is a Jeremy Waldefetch or
oh Vanderfetch.
oh, yeah, Vanderfetch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know Jeremy was he was the one I kind of passed the keys on to when I left, and so
Okay.
he knows where everything is, but he can get you on the Confluence page and get get you set up with the access to the file share. Um,
Okay.
there's
Great.
also the RBAC group, which I think I made Craig Allwart a he's a manager of that as well.
What is the other one? Sorry, I'm not familiar.
Well, it's Allwart, and I forget. I think it's ALWERDT or something like that.
Uh,
Um, yeah.
have never.
Well, if you talk to anybody working on
Okay.
yeah, if you talk to anybody working on the Voltron project, most
Mhm.
all of them were members of the Python users group before I left.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I can find someone
Okay,
to
I hope that
connect.
helps.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks like my time's up, and that's fine. I was just about to wrap up anyway. So thanks for stopping by.
Okay. You have a good weekend.
Yeah, and if you get a hold of Jeremy, he should be able to hook you up with those resources.
Okay.
All
Okay. I
right.
will give it a try. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
I really should have paused the recording for that. I will have to remember to cut that out later. Um, okay, so we're going to need a method to add feed items. Let's see, and it's pretty much just going to be straightforward, creating a feed item object and adding it in. So this kind of actually brings up a good question for our database interface. And so so we've got an update feed method. So we should probably have an update feed items method, because what we're going to do in our interface is we want to basically have a set of objects coming in from feed parser, and we want to suss out which ones are new and which ones are don't exist in our database, and then we need to add them in. So let's see. So we'll probably just do something like that, and where it's a list of objects, and we won't get into the scary details of it until later. So let's see. So we've add feed items, add group, add feed items, get feed items, delete. Okay, so update feed. Let's see, DB interface. So we've already got our code to add group. We've got our code to add a feed. And then the question becomes, do we want to be able to do these things at the same time? I'm not too worried about it. And yeah, we can go from there. So I'm actually out of time, so we will continue this in 2 weeks. Thank you for stopping by.